Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. This is Francois, your host. I'm here with Roel today. Hey Roel, how are you?
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning or good evening, wherever you're listening from.
Exactly. And today we're talking about the Wi-Fi Alliance. Very exciting episode for us. We've been trying to record something with them for a little while, and we have Kevin Robinson with us. He is the Senior VP of Marketing, and he's here to talk to us today about the Wi-Fi Alliance and about the the recent FCC announcement around 6 gigahertz. And we're going to talk about the Wi-Fi 6E certification program that goes along with that. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask Kevin to join us and present himself. Hey, Kevin, nice to have you with us today. Would you be able to present yourself? Just tell us, who you are, what you do. Maybe you can present what the Wi-Fi Alliance is as well to the audience, and let us know how you also got started with Wi-Fi.
Sure, and it's absolutely great to be here with both of you. So thank you so much for having us on. So I'm Kevin Robinson, as you said. I'm the Senior VP Marketing for Wi-Fi Alliance. And mostly what I do is I manage the group within Wi-Fi Alliance that does both product management, outbound marketing, our events, et cetera. So a good portion of what we do on a regular basis. I've been with the Alliance for, I guess, 12 or so years now. So really been there through a lot of really good times for Wi-Fi as an industry. And I know the topic we're getting into today is really going to be an inflection point for kind of continued good times for the industry. So excited to tell all of your listeners what they can look forward to as kind of participants or part of the Wi-Fi industry. Now, for those who may not be as familiar with the Wi-Fi Alliance itself, we're an organization that has an incredibly broad impact on the everyday lives of people around the world, yet we're probably not known all that well outside of those kind of in the know in the industry. Wi-Fi Alliance is the worldwide network of companies that brings you Wi-Fi. Our more than 800 member companies come together with this singular vision to connect everyone, everything, everywhere. And many organizations have these very lofty visions that sound similar to ours, but it's really kind of very interesting as you look at the impact Wi-Fi has around the world, how close we are actually getting to this vision that we set out for ourselves. In our 20-year history, we've been instrumental in driving the success of Wi-Fi to the point where it is really one of the most ubiquitous technologies on the planet. Wi-Fi is up there with like the FM radio in terms of how successful it's been. We've got more than 13 billion devices that are still in active use. So if you think about that, we're almost at 2 devices for every man, woman, and child on the planet. And we're shipping about another 4 billion devices per year. One of the most important things that Wi-Fi Alliance does as an organization is we manage a program called Wi-Fi Certified, which is a certification program for Wi-Fi devices that makes sure that they work well together regardless of vendor. And Wi-Fi Certified has really been instrumental in delivering the success of Wi-Fi as a technology in our history. And again, is going to continue to drive the success of our industry going forward. Again, I mean, Wi-Fi delivers more than half of all internet traffic. So that's half of every email, video, you name it, it's going over a Wi-Fi link. And that translates into an incredible value for just everyday consumers, where we expect to deliver almost $3.5 trillion in economic value by 2023. So again, it's been a really exciting ride being at the Wi-Fi Alliance, and there is no signs of it letting up anytime soon.
So the Wi-Fi Alliance is obviously an alliance. So can you talk a little bit about the members? Like, who are the members of this alliance? And can anyone become a member, or does it have to be a company? What type of interest do the member find in the Wi-Fi Alliance? Would you be able to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Wi-Fi Alliance is really made up of kind of the who's who of the connectivity space, right? Again, we're around 800 member companies. If you look at our industry or membership makeup, everything everywhere in the value chain. So from the silicon vendors, your Qualcomms, Intels, Broadcoms, Cypresses, et cetera, right? All the way down to service providers who are delivering services based on Wi-Fi, your AT&Ts, your Comcasts, your Orange, et cetera, and everything in between. So the handset vendors, Samsung, Sony, Apple, TV, I mean, anything. Ford, Toyota. So if a company is making a Wi-Fi product, there's a very good chance that they are involved in Wi-Fi Alliance.
And so when you guys work on the certification programs, you would create, I'm guessing, a working group, and then you would have different engineers from those companies, those members coming together and defining the rules, defining which features are mandatory, which features are optionals, and so on.
So one of the most important things that Wi-Fi Alliance does is, as you're aware, many of the technologies or the standards themselves that make their way into Wi-Fi are developed in other standards development organizations, or SDOs, right? So the IEEE, of course, that's where 802.11 comes from. But it can be from the IETF, it can be a number of different standards development organizations, and as well as some technologies are developed within Wi-Fi Alliance itself. And one of the most important things Wi-Fi does is we represent the consensus of the industry on which technologies are actually essential to delivering Wi-Fi product. So there is a down selection process that happens from the standards and a prioritization of these are the most important things to get out to the market now so that users can benefit from them. And those discussions are what happen in Wi-Fi Alliance. The unique thing is that in Wi-Fi Alliance, it's one company, one vote. So in these working groups or task groups, as we call them, that you mentioned, Francois, it is the very large company has the same vote as the startup company. And so it's incredibly important because we are looking to serve a very diverse industry and market. Wi-Fi is in almost any vertical you can imagine.
Yeah, and it's I mean, for us working in the field, sometimes that's what's a little bit opaque for us. We don't really know, how these decisions are made, and sometimes, we hear a lot of people on the field. Sometimes they would complain about, this and that decision, because it makes our work day job, I guess, a little bit more challenging. But and people have been talking of maybe creating a company or an association, I guess, in between the Wi-Fi engineers that could be part of the Wi-Fi Alliance, and I guess have a vote in those decisions when those working groups are working on these decisions.
Mm-hmm. I would just say that as an alliance, whether it's the end user or it's those who are installing, maintaining, managing networks, all of those perspectives are incredibly important. Obviously, we have a number of proxies, if you will, or people who are bringing in perspective from their customers, and that's the way it generally works today. But we are a constantly evolving organization, and at the end of the day, as an organization, we're going to do what benefits the industry, the technology, and our customers best. And who knows where the alliance will evolve to in the future.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that part of the members are companies that actually create devices that connect to the Wi-Fi, and we all know how complex that can be. Because different devices would have different behaviors or will want different behaviors on the Wi-Fi, so it's hard to make everyone happy, and you kind of have to all work together. Awesome. So let's approach the subject we wanted to talk about today, which is around the 6 gigahertz frequency band. So just to recap a little bit, I think last month in April, the FCC announced that they're going to open 1,200 megahertz of spectrum in the 6 gigahertz frequency band to be used for unlicensed use, which includes Wi-Fi, I guess. what does this mean for you guys at the Wi-Fi Alliance? I mean, have you guys been involved in the process? I'm guessing yes, but what does it mean like from now? What do you guys have to do in order to make sure that the devices will be operating properly, and make sure that I guess on your side the marketing message is ready for for Wi-Fi on 6 gigahertz?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I think I would be remiss if I did not say that the FCC's decision to allocate 6 gigahertz for unlicensed use is, without a doubt, the most monumental decision around Wi-Fi spectrum in the 20 years we've been around. Period. Right. It is going to be. We're going to look back in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, what have you, and look back at this point as being incredibly impactful on the Wi-Fi landscape as we will see it at that time in the future. The FCC voted unanimously on that report and order, which I think is also very telling, to give 1,200 megahertz in the U.S. Of the 6 gigahertz band for unlicensed use. And of course, Wi-Fi is going to be one of the primary users of that unlicensed spectrum. 6 gigahertz brings these 7 super wide 160 megahertz channels, or of course 1480 megahertz channels. But the bottom line is this is an incredible amount of additional spectrum that is going to let Wi-Fi really transform some of the experiences that we're looking to deliver to our end users. It's going to allow Wi-Fi to go into a number of either new verticals or really expand our role in verticals. Industrial IoT is one that immediately comes to mind there, right? And the story really around the 6 gigahertz rules, at least in the U.S., isn't even fully written yet, right? There's this FNPRM that's going to look at very low power outdoor devices, among other things, that's going to allow us to address even more use cases. Now, of course, the U.S. is really just the first to make 6 gigahertz available for Wi-Fi, and we're very involved. We're very involved in that, and we continue to be involved in helping other countries that are strongly considering 6 gigahertz regulation, and really making the case for that, and how the end user and the consumer and their citizens are going to benefit from additional unlicensed spectrum. In terms of really what it means for Wi-Fi Alliance. This is, as I said, this is going to transform how the Wi-Fi connectivity experience is realized for the end user. If you just kind of put this a bit in perspective, so when Wi-Fi got started, there was a decent amount of spectrum if you looked at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, right? But really, most of Wi-Fi was operating on 3 20 megahertz channels down in 2.4 gigahertz, right? So 60 megahertz of spectrum. And now, if you, depending on the regulatory domain you're referencing, you might have more than 1,600 total spectrum available, right? And so this is going to, again, have an incredible impact. It's going to bring faster speeds. It's going to bring greater capacity. It's going to lower latency significantly. A lot of that is brought around with some of the capabilities in Wi-Fi 6, but when you move the capabilities of Wi-Fi 6 into this kind of pristine 1,200 megahertz of spectrum, it just amplifies no pun intended, it just amplifies the benefits that Wi-Fi 6 can deliver. Some of the key things are going to be around just the density of devices. When you look at, there's a sports stadium. I happen to live in Austin, Texas, and I love my Longhorns, but actually one of our rivals, OU, has a stadium north of here, and they just did a Wi-Fi 6 rollout in that entire stadium. These are enormous stadiums, and the challenges in those type of environments are incredible, but Wi-Fi 6 is very much designed for those challenges, and 6 gigahertz is just going to, again, make it even better.
Yeah, that's a good point. And with all the features that Wi-Fi 6 provides us, these benefits, how does the Wi-Fi Alliance go about making what's mandatory and optional in the certification? What's the thought process there?
Sure. So it's driven by what the industry perceives as the market need, right? If you look at the .11 specification, it is incredibly large, right? I don't know if you ever tried to work through. Maybe you have, because obviously you're in the industry, right? But there's an incredible number of features that are in that standard, and it's growing every month. So what we do within the Wi-Fi Alliance is we bring all of these companies together, and it's very much a neutral ground. And that point will kind of come up again as we get into how development of 6E is progressing, but in the actual development of our testing regimes. But just in the selection of features, you're bringing these companies together who are incredibly fierce competitors, right? And that's great. They need to get out there and they need to compete fiercely with each other to meet the needs of all the customers and all our users, right? But when they come into Wi-Fi Alliance, they need to find a way to get to a level of consensus on what are the features that are most important to bring out to the industry. And when you add in, there's usually kind of a time-bounded element to this. So whereas I think we would all love to bring every single possible feature to the market, it's simply not possible because we would miss that opportunity of when the end users actually need it. So those discussions in the Wi-Fi Alliance are very much focused on, okay, what are the set of features that we can get done by X date? Which are the most important ones that are absolutely essential to delivering an expected Wi-Fi experience? Those are mandatory. Okay, which are the features that might be, maybe they aren't going to be as broadly used, or they're very focused on a specific vertical, but it's critical, but they are critical for those verticals. Okay, those are our optional features. So that type of rationalization around capabilities and market needs is something that is kind of the typical type of conversation that you have in Wi-Fi Alliance, and it's worked very well for 20 years.
Yeah, I can only imagine what those discussions sound like. They must be very long discussions, and that's why they're time-based. But it's very interesting to see what comes out of it, as here are the mandatory and here are the optional. And I liked what you said about there with very specific verticals, and some of those end up being the optional requirements there. But yeah, thank you for explaining that.
And so if we go back a little bit, and I wanted to talk about the naming, I guess the Wi-Fi naming convention that you guys introduced at the end of 2018. You decided to just forget about the alphabet soup of calling, the different version of Wi-Fi using their amendment name from the IEEE, and you introduced Wi-Fi, 4, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, and so on, to make it a little bit more, I guess, approachable for the end user. Would you be able to go back and explain, how all of this process worked on your end at the Wi-Fi Alliance? And would you also be able to explain why did you guys decided to use Wi-Fi 6E for the certification program that will go along with the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi use? And maybe can you talk about Wi-Fi 7, or is it even defined yet?
Sure. Well, we'll try to touch on as much of that as we can. I wish I could say that there was this kind of really cool reasoning behind the 6E. Wi-Fi 6E represents Wi-Fi 6 extended into the 6 gigahertz band, right? So, I apologize if we were hoping for some, like it was, came down from the mountain or something, but it's really very basic in terms of coming up with what the U stood for. But going back to when we even adopted this generational naming approach, it was fairly contentious, right? You have a lot of different stakeholders in the industry. Of course, everyone is used to rattling off the various .11 versions, right? But what we really found is, once you get outside the people who are really in the know, it was incredibly confusing. And Wi-Fi Alliance wanted to come up with a way that end users could better understand the experience that they should expect from their Wi-Fi devices and networks. By the way, that's another key piece, right? Because if you're a company or you're a venue and you make this investment in the latest and greatest generation network, but then everybody shows up with client devices that are 11 and 11G God forbid, 11B, right, with all the impact that has on some of these high performance networks, right? And how do we as an industry help the user understand? They still get to pick what they want, right? So, but we wanted them to make informed decisions, knowing these are the benefits associated with the various generations, and if those benefits are important to you, or those benefits are important to a company deploying a network, then now you know what to go look for, right? And of course, the sophisticated users get all this. When we went out and actually polled average users, right, 60% of them incorrectly identified simply what 802.11 was. They didn't know it was WLAN, Wi-Fi, however you want to term it, right? Now, if you start getting into how many users could actually put the 11 BGN, AX, et cetera, in order, it's about 5% of consumers could correctly do that. And once you start taking out just the random, like if they guessed what percentage, would have randomly guessed that, it's pretty bad, right? But it's not really surprising if you think about it. And so that's a lot of what drove Wi-Fi Alliance to come up with this generational naming scheme, and it has been incredibly successful. When I walk around, CES, Broadband World Forum, it doesn't really matter where I am. It is incredibly rare to see use of 11AX in terms of identifying a product or the type technology it has. Now, yes, when you get into some of the underlying features, yep, you're gonna get those taken off and right out of the standard. But this was incredibly important. Take that forward to 6E, of course, and these are devices that, because 6 gigahertz is such an important opportunity for the industry, and that the experience is going to be so much improved for users who can take advantage of it, Wi-Fi Alliance felt it really did warrant a very visible modifier to make sure that people knew that they were getting that capability.
Yeah, I think that was my takeaway when I first heard it. At first, I wasn't really behind it, but if you really do side with the consumer or whoever the operator is of these Wi-Fi networks who's making the purchasing decisions, they just don't know what 802.11ax is. It's very hard to describe to them like, yeah, this is the latest Wi-Fi standard. They just stare at you blankly and lose interest. But if you just say Wi-Fi 6 is going to be the latest iteration of Wi-Fi, the next version, and you're currently on Wi-Fi 4, they have an easy way to gauge where they're at with their Wi-Fi equipment, their Wi-Fi devices, their Wi-Fi network, and then be able to go, all right, well, I'm about X. They just know there may be 2 versions behind, but that could be a matter of like 10, 15 years of technology. So I can see why that naming change was made. And it is definitely better for the consumer.
Even for us, like on the industry side of things, like nowadays everyone is saying Wi-Fi 6. Like everyone adopted the new naming, I think, pretty fast. Even though at the beginning, the purists were pushing back. And like,
there was a little bit of resistance there, but everyone just hopped on.
Yes, my eyebrows were singed a little bit at the very beginning. So.
Yeah, and then now that you have 6E, people are like, so now they're coming back to letters. So what's the deal? I think it's like from the purely marketing standpoint, I think it worked pretty well. And like you said, it's been successful on your end, and you could see it every day in your life. So I think everyone is over it now on our side, I think. And people are very comfortable saying Wi-Fi 6, no problem.
Well, good. I'm glad you all came around.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the certification program. So last year, September, I believe you guys released the Wi-Fi 6 certification program. And now you're working on the Wi-Fi 6E certification program for all the devices on 6 gigahertz. And like you said, it's an amazing opportunity for everyone, especially the fact that on 6 gigahertz, it's a brand new frequency band, and the IEEE, that they are pushing for only, AX capabilities or AX, devices allowed on 6 gigahertz, kind of, giving us the ability to start fresh. And like you said, enable lower latency, higher throughput, and so on. So are you guys looking at this when you're building the certification program? Are you trying to integrate that and taking the advantage that we're starting from scratch, and maybe taking advantage of that fact of starting from scratch to introduce new stuff that you couldn't introduce before in your certification programs? And I'm thinking about maybe more client testing, or more standardization around the client behavior. Can you share your thoughts on that a little bit?
Sure. So, specifically around Wi-Fi 6E, you're absolutely right that this is a unique opportunity for Wi-Fi as an industry. We have been incredibly successful in part because of the backwards interoperability that we've provided for 20 years, right? So if I go dig in my closet and I pull out that 11B AP that I had, it's still going to work, right? And so there's a lot of value in that for consumers and others. But of course, there's the challenges that go along with it as well. And so 6 gigahertz really is a unique opportunity. Some of the things that you will see is that for Wi-Fi certified devices, to operate in 6 gigahertz, you must be a Wi-Fi 6 device, right? So that right there, in terms of one, it speaks to the importance of buying certified gear, right? But also it again allows us to kind of ensure this higher level of experience, because we're able to kind of cut over to the most efficient radio access technologies and protocols, right? In addition, it's another great opportunity for a bit of a cutover on security. So for Wi-Fi certified devices, they will only use the latest generation of security when operating in 6 gigahertz. So a lot of these, legacy transition modes and things that, are transition modes sometimes in name only, as you see them out there for a decade or more, right? This is a great opportunity to start addressing some of those things, because Wi-Fi has some of the best security out there when you set up the best security the Wi-Fi offers. And so that's another great opportunity that you're going to see with Wi-Fi certified devices operating at 6 gigahertz.
So you're talking about WPA3?
Yes. So WPA3 is, for one, it's already mandated for all future Wi-Fi certified devices. But with Wi-Fi 6E, those devices will not use any of the older generations of technology in 6 gigahertz. Okay, and so this is really just one more way to encourage moving up to the latest security standards.
Okay, so in order for a device or AP to be certified in Wi-Fi 6E, they just cannot support any of the older. Does that even mean not supporting older security methods?
Well, no, they can of course support the other available security methods in legacy bands, right? So,
okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so the backwards interoperability is going to be maintained. That is, again, has been essential to our success. But this is an opportunity, like with the radio technologies, same thing with security, to have a little bit of a clean break and say, okay, let's, what do we really need in terms of requirements going into this band? And then let's build on that elevated foundation going forward.
And then, so talking about when this certification will be ready, do you have any timeline to share, or is it going to take a little while, maybe a year or so, for you guys to develop the certification program?
You'll be happy to hear my answer on that. It is not going to take a year. So the Wi-Fi industry is really about action and delivering the benefits of this new spectrum as quickly as possible. And the case is that we're going to deliver it on a pace that has rarely been seen before. There's a lot of spectrum that gets allocated that kind of sits fallow for a while. Wi-Fi is going to move into 6 gigahertz by the fourth quarter of this year in terms of device availability. the Wi-Fi industry really kind of galvanized around this opportunity. Development is continuing unabated as we speak, even with all of the challenges kind of going on in the world today. We have this, such how our plug testing is working. Everything is done remotely, so people are sitting in their homes or where they are, actually running through our test development processes that are happening in Santa Clara, but they're doing it all remotely. So the industry is incredibly committed to meeting our deadlines and delivering 6E. So again, you should expect to see Wi-Fi 6E products entering the market this year, with the first 6E access points available in the fourth quarter of 2020. The Wi-Fi Alliance certification for Wi-Fi 6E devices will be available right away in early 2021. So as soon as we get into 2021, you should expect to see a certification out. And of course, Wi-Fi certified often serves as kind of this inflection point for mass adoption. So every generation of Wi-Fi, you have a lot of the early implementations of the hero products, right? And there's no difference here. You're going to see those coming out ahead of certification. But certification is when you see the mass adoption really starting. So we expect that momentum is going to pick up in 2021, getting into smartphones, PCs, TVs, etc. IDC is actually predicting that we will ship 300 million Wi-Fi 6E devices in 2021. So yeah, you're definitely not a year out when you start seeing massive numbers of Wi-Fi 6E devices.
That's very good to hear. And it's also great to hear that you're still able to test these devices remotely and be able to still move forward with this, because then it just doesn't delay the whole thing. But I have a question regarding the testing of these devices, because there are a lot of different types of devices. And I'm not talking about access points, but more like our mobile phones, the laptops, any kind of wireless device that we use to connect to wireless. What is the process like for testing features like roaming? Because there's such a device feature or behavior disparity there. Like some devices just, and I'm going to pick on roaming quite a bit because everyone's so mobile. We have something like WPA3, but how about something for like roaming to get a more similar behavior when it comes to devices that are mobile across a Wi-Fi network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. The sticky client, right? That is going to be the thorn for quite some time. So I want to bring up another certification program the Wi-Fi Alliance has, and it's something called Wi-Fi Vantage. This is a certification program that has been really driven largely by service providers, in dealing service providers, and of course those who are selling into very large corporate networks, et cetera. Right? It's all around how do we deliver a good experience in managed network environments. And what this program does is it has releases, release 1, release 2, release 3, that have very specific definitions of which are the capabilities at this point in time that are necessary for delivering a good experience in a managed network environment. So things like, agile multiband to deliver seamless, fast roaming with essentially no packet loss, right? So I can walk all the way through my enterprise campus on a voice over Wi-Fi call with no degradation in quality, because I'm going from access point to access point to access point. That is all included in Wi-Fi Vantage. Other things like optimized connectivity that starts addressing a lot of the overhead of management traffic that you often have to see in some of these larger deployments. So capabilities that reduce that. So more of the channel utilization is used productively for data traffic instead of for management traffic. Things like Passpoint are a part of Vantage that allow devices to come off of a cellular network and roam onto a Wi-Fi network and vice versa. So there's a number of different features and capabilities that are in that, and we actually came up with this name around it just to make it simple. So somebody can say, oh, hey, I want I need Wi-Fi Vantage Release 2 because that's got the kind of feature set for the types of use cases I'm looking at. So that's how the Wi-Fi Alliance chose to address that. Because as you said, it's an incredibly diverse industry, right? If I get it, if I'm making maybe a set-top box or something that is pretty much static nailed to the wall, I probably don't need rapid roam times. Right now, I need to be able to move it from one AP to another if an AP, let's say, gets turned off or has to go to a different channel, whatever. But because we have such diversity, we tend to come up with these things like a Wi-Fi Vantage that are a shortcut to get to the sets of capabilities that matter most to you.
Has there been a discussion to make that rolled into Wi-Fi 6, for example, where if being mobile is so critical nowadays, I think there should be a big focus on roaming. Maybe has there been a discussion about trying to roll that in as a requirement, or have the members of the alliance maybe pushed back a little on that?
No, in fact, it's absolutely the case. So Wi-Fi 6 requires agile multiband, right? So this is all Wi-Fi certified 6 devices have the ability to rapidly transition from AP to AP. They have the ability to get information about the environment that they're operating in, so they can make a decision of whether to jump to a different AP and when to make that jump to another AP. So they know what other access points are even available without having to do off-channel scanning, et cetera. So absolutely, and the industry saw the need for exactly what you mentioned, and so that is a required piece of Wi-Fi certified 6.
Okay. Oh, definitely.
That's good to hear.
That,
Just like, security is a big focus as well. WPA3 is a requirement. I think MFP is a requirement now for any new devices, which is Absolutely. Nice. And hopefully it's going to help us to, like in the field, we have so many features that we would like to enable, but we have to disable because some clients, don't support them. So hopefully, the more Wi-Fi 6 devices we start to have on our networks, the more we can start to enable those advanced features.
Absolutely.
Right, Kevin?
And then of course my shameless plug is look for Wi-Fi certified gear, because it's that is one of the ways that we help drive that adoption as an industry.
Yeah, you mean don't buy the one day I went to a crowdfunding website. I forgot the name of it. It's like Indiegogo website, right? And they had this new Wi-Fi router, and you could connect by just tapping your phone and all of that. And then I asked them a question: "Is like, is it certified with the Wi-Fi Alliance?" And I never got an answer back. I guess not.
They probably started looking into it.
Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate the talk. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. Hopefully we can talk again in the future with the Wi-Fi Alliance. If you were to if our audience have any questions, where can they join you, or where can they join the Wi-Fi Alliance?
So they can go to www.wifi.org, and Wi-Fi does have a dash in it, so that's one thing that sometimes throws people off. Or they can connect with me personally on LinkedIn. They can follow us on social. We're on Facebook, Twitter, all the usual places. So we encourage everybody who's kind of in this space or just wants to keep up with what is going on in the industry to connect us through one of those various channels. And it has been my absolute pleasure to be here. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kevin. We will include the links in the show notes. If you head over to clear2send.net/222, which is the number for this episode, you guys will have the details. And the Wi-Fi Alliance do have a newsletter that's called The Beacon, which is pretty cool. And they send it out once in a while. So you guys can also, if you want to get the latest news from the Wi-Fi Alliance, you can register to receive this newsletter. Well, thank you very much for listening to us. And we'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Kevin.